This is a day I've been waiting for anxiously since Season 1 of Castlevania ended. Season 2's out now, and I swear to God, I woke up at like 7 a.m. I ran to the TV, turned it on, I sat on my ass, didn't eat breakfast, didn't brush my teeth, until I watched the entire thing from beginning to end. And I have a lot to say about Season 2. I'm worried that I'm going to forget something. In fact, I know I'm going to forget something, and someone's going to say something in the comments that I'm going to read and be like, damn, I forgot to mention that. There was just so much going through my head the whole time while I was watching this. I rewatched it twice, by the way. I saw it a total of 3 times from beginning to end, just to kind of make sure I could get all my feelings together and really solidify how I felt. Just to start off with my overall general feel, it's miles better than Season 1. There's no comparison. If you never saw my review for Season 1, by the way, you can click the annotation right there in the corner, and it'll take you right to that review. I did like Season 1, but it always felt like it was just made to be an introduction to the show. Just almost like a sample to show the audience, this is how we're handling Castlevania. Season 2 is literally twice as long. 8 episodes, about 25 minutes each, so that's a total runtime of about 3 hours. If you include Season 1 in the mix, that's a total running time of 5 hours for the storyline of Dracula's Curse, which is pretty good because the NES game, it's like an hour or 2 NES game with very little plot. And Season 2 I liked. I actually loved it. Portions of it. When I was watching it, there was just some really extreme highs, and then by the time it was over, I wanted to go into the show and end it with this immense feeling of loving every juicy minute of it. That's what I wanted as a hardcore Castlevania fan, and by the time it was over, I didn't feel that. At some parts, I thought to myself, man, this is just absolute perfection. But then other parts, I didn't feel that way, which I'm going to get into all that. This review is going to have spoilers, by the way. Spoilers aplenty. So if you haven't seen the Netflix series yet, don't rage in the comment section if I say something you didn't want to know. One aspect I could consistently say that the Netflix series does is handle storytelling better than the games ever did. In all honesty, this was an era when games were made to sell. Storyline was secondary. They would just sprinkle a basic story throughout the experience just so you had a reason to go kill the final boss. Video games weren't yet this medium where serious storytelling was a thing. I have to give the team behind Castlevania extreme props because they basically had to invent most of the story and make all these characters interesting, and they overall do deliver. Right away, Season 2 opens up with more backstory on Dracula's wife Lisa, and this is possibly the most important person in all of Castlevania history. Her death is what caused Dracula to even start attacking humanity, and they did such a good job building the tension here. You know that the bishop is going to come take her for practicing medicine in her village, and they find all kinds of equipment that they don't understand at all. It's so above their heads because Dracula, he's for centuries just been learning all kinds of things, so they can't fathom the idea that this technology is not from the devil. And it's actually a really hard scene to watch, and I mean that in a completely good way. The bishop is just this despicable old man. But one part of the scene that does bother me a little, and it's something I've noticed that the writer Warren Ellis tends to do. I've never really liked it when writers inject their own personal beliefs into a story randomly, and I feel like he does that from time to time in Castlevania. It feels a little bit out of place. Let me give you an example. So he's always been open about not being a religious person at all, and there's been a lot of anger from some people about how the church is represented in the series as this corrupt organization that's burning innocent people. To me, that portion of the story makes sense within this universe. That really isn't that far off from the church historically during that era. It makes sense within the context of the story. So he tends to throw little jabs at religion throughout the Netflix series, which is not the problem. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. When Lisa is getting dragged out by the church, begging them not to do this, she makes a comment about Satan not being real.
I can't promise your safety if you harm me.
You dare menace me with Satan? Get her out of here before I strike her dead.
Not Satan! If you anger him, he's worse, because he's real. Please!
Dracula is your husband, a vampire first of all, an immortal creature of the night who lives in a castle filled with crazy shit, that is weak to holy water, and who also has the ability to raise an army from the depths of hell. And that's what I mean. I felt like that was the writer injecting his own personal beliefs onto characters that live in this crazy supernatural world. It doesn't feel natural, feels a little out of place. It's not a huge deal, it's just a small nitpick that I had to mention. But overall, Castlevania Season 2 starts off really strong. Now let's talk about the characters and how they're represented, and I think this is the show's absolute greatest strength. It took this group of characters that had a paper-thin backstory. In some cases, they didn't even have a backstory. And they somehow made them into compelling characters while having to make up a ton of stuff. Back when Season 1 aired, I did wish it had a little more Dracula in it than we were given. Rest assured, Season 2 has Dracula front and center, a character in the games that you usually don't even see until the final battle. They made Dracula way more interesting than he's ever been in the classic Castlevania universe, and this series answers the question, if Dracula wants to wipe out all of humanity, what are vampires going to feed on? Turns out, nothing. Dracula wants to end everything. He wants all humans to die, vampires are going to starve to death, including himself, and creatures of the night will inherit the earth. He wants everything gone. He is so far gone and obsessed with the destruction of humanity that all he cares about is that humans die. That is the only thing that matters.
If you kill all the humans, what are we gonna eat?
What?
It's very simple, Dracula. If you kill all the humans, where does the continuing supply of human blood come from?
You will be taken care of, Godbrand.
Yes, of course, right. Except, what if we're not? What if you just want to kill all the humans and you don't leave us enough to keep in camps to feed from?
Brayla. Just to keep the peace between squabbling creatures who will starve and die before the end of the year anyway.
I think this was a genius way of representing him, and you kind of feel for him. I mean, mind you, the genocide he's spreading is a terrible thing, of course, but every once in a while, you get a small glimpse of what he was before becoming a mass-murdering vampire lord. The series explores multiple aspects of his personality, but at the same time, they remind you how terrifying Dracula can be, to the point where other vampires don't dare to cross him.
Are you going to continue questioning me? Are you going to fight me, little Godbrand? No. Then why are you still here, making your little noises? Get out before I slit you up the middle and bite out your heart.
And in preparing his assault on mankind, Dracula's gathered vampire lords from around the world together to fight under his banner. This is great because it further expands the Castlevania universe, showing us that Dracula isn't the only powerful vampire out there. Different countries have their own vampires ruling portions of lands, in a vampire hierarchy with Dracula being the main force that rules them all due to his sheer power. Dracula's court was one of the most interesting creations for the Netflix series, with most of the vampires being fairly generic with few lines of dialogue. Actually, the vampires in the background, like the Indian looking one, the one that looks like she's from Japan, some of those vampires have zero lines throughout the whole series. They're literally just background villains. But one of the more entertaining ones was Godbrand. He's this Viking vampire that basically serves as the comic relief, and he's got some genuinely hilarious moments.
Godbrand, you've never met anything you didn't immediately kill, fuck, or make a boat out of.
I like boats. I'm a fucking Viking. We're supposed to make boats out of things. We're all gonna die. All of us.
Godbrand, wait.
I'm not gonna fuck you, Carmilla. I'm too pissed off.
You stupid bastard.
I have blood stored in cold canisters. There are animals in the lower levels. You won't go hungry, Godbrand.
I don't want to be rationing myself on fucking pig blood.
Careful.
Pig blood gives me the shit. I'm sorry, but there it is.
Normally, funny moments wouldn't mesh well with an overall dark tone, but here it's done so well that it doesn't seem to come out of left field. What does seem to come out of left field at times is when the humor focuses on curse words. Now, I don't mind curse words at all. That doesn't bother me in the least. But when the humor solely relies on an F-bomb or something similar as the punchline, it just kind of feels forced at times.
I will find us a covered wagon and horses if you two can manage not to kill each other while I'm gone.
Oh, please. We're not children. He shouldn't die. Yes, fuck you.
Hector and Isaac are two of the most interesting characters in this entire series. I won't go into too much detail about their video game backstory or anything, and every little change that was made to the characters, since I did a whole video on that alone, that you can click right here to see, the history of Hector and Isaac. But Hector and Isaac are two humans that Dracula put in command of his forces that are completely loyal to him, and this just sends his generals into a frenzy. None of them can understand why Dracula is trusting two humans to lead his vampire forces and make a battle plan for him, when he's trying to exterminate their very race. And the conflict it causes creates so much good story material.
The only two humans in your inner court, and they are the ones who will plan our next attack.
The only two generals in my court who are not driven by thirst. The only two who are bound by loyalty and intellect. True. They are not vampires like you and I, Godbrand. And that is why I trust them. For we are about the business of wiping humanity from the earth. And they still stand with me.
And there's been some backlash from fans about Isaac because he was made a black man versus the original red-haired Japanese goth metal look. And I usually don't like when characters are changed like this just for the sake of changing something for no reason. But I always thought the original character design was awful. So any change was welcome in my book. I mean, come on, look at that. I hate that look. In this version of events, Isaac has a really cool African accent, and he started out as some sort of slave to an abusive priest, and he grew up hating humans. When Dracula eventually found him and gave him friendship, the only kindness Isaac ever saw was from a vampire, so he's just this blind, loyal follower to Dracula, and he's the only one that Dracula is completely honest with concerning his plans for the world.
You are Dracula. No one has a right to your true beliefs.
Not even you.
Not even me.
You, Isaac, are the only one I've told the truth to. Because I believe you are the only one who grasps the necessity of it all.
And Hector is the complete opposite of Isaac, growing up being shunned by his family and his community because he practiced these dark abilities that brought animals back to life. I like that they kept his connection with animals in there straight out of the prequel manga. He's a much gentler soul than Isaac, and he's on board with Dracula's plans, but under the impression that humans are going to be reduced and controlled, not completely exterminated. Come to think of it, I'm wondering if the decision to change Isaac's race was made to further highlight the differences between Isaac and Hector. Two sides of the same coin, one dark-skinned, one light-skinned, one dedicated completely to Dracula and willing to do anything to bring his plans to fruition, the other more reserved and wanting to do things in what he sees as a humane way. I might be looking too deep into this aspect, but I think that's a great way to go about looking at the character change. And I think it works well for the story they're trying to tell. Just this subtle way to show that these two characters are very different, although they're playing the same role in a way.
You can spend so long in a castle that you can forget how the sun feels. Don't you think?
I like the castle. The stone stays cool no matter where we are.
You like the cold?
When I'm cold, I can eat meat or throw a cloak on. I spent my whole life in hot places. You can't escape heat.
But we are on the same side.
Is this where we kiss like Benedictine monks from different monasteries?
I don't think I've ever heard you try to tell a joke before.
You still haven't.
The writing when it comes to these two characters is great, especially since in the Curse of Darkness game that they're included in, they barely touch on this point in their lives. The prequel manga for Curse of Darkness is really the only source material that even references it. In the video games, they had the ability to create demons that would be loyal to them in an art called devil forging. It's very similar here, but instead of creating demons, they explained it as creating life from death, bringing dead things back to life and putting them in a mindless, controlled state, where the monsters are loyal to the Devil Forge masters and their own goals. So it is very similar. And by the way, I love that Hector has this little dead zombie dog that he keeps around. I think his name was Cesar or Caesar or something. Again, highlighting his more gentle personality. He's got these little animals that he loves, and they're just like decayed, eyeball missing creatures. The relationship that Isaac and Hector have with Dracula is also what helps flesh out Dracula's character even further in the show. He doesn't trust the other vampires. He knows they act on impulse and thirst for blood, and he makes it very clear that that's the exact reason he trusts two humans. He genuinely cares about Hector and Isaac, and he actively seeks out their friendship. This is a Dracula we have not seen before in the games. An evil vampire that has people he genuinely cares for to the point where when he thinks he's in danger near the end, he even sends Isaac away to make sure he survives. Definitely a strong change from the games in which everybody is a pawn of his, but it results in a much deeper character.
You are the greatest of your people, Isaac. You have a soul, I think. Or perhaps you simply deserve a better fate than to die instead of me.
I choose my death as I chose my life.
Then I regret only that I have taken a choice for you.
No! Dracula! No!
And with all the disorder going on in Dracula's court that two humans being present is causing, someone is bound to take advantage of the situation, and that's where Carmilla steps in. I absolutely loved her representation here. In the video game, she usually serves as nothing more than a boss fight every once in a while, and she's completely dedicated to Dracula. I actually did a video on her backstory too, which you can also check out by clicking the link right here, The History of Carmilla. Netflix Carmilla is the leader of her own little vampire nation, who was turned into a vampire centuries ago by a man that tried to enslave her, essentially. So she's this bitchy, strong female vampire that constantly challenges Dracula in front of others on purpose. She's trying to trigger him.
Why was this new wife of yours never turned?
What did you say?
You married, you had a child, and yet you did not make her a vampire. Why was that? Were you simply keeping a human pet? And if so, why is vampire society going to war with the world over it?
I will speak with you alone. Attend me.
And she sees that Dracula's ambitions aren't what he's telling all the other vampires, so she's going around the castle trying to turn everyone against each other, and she even convinces Hector to help her in her goals, using his gentle nature and his need to reduce human suffering for her own advantages. She doesn't care about humans at all. She's actually just trying to stage her own takeover, remove Dracula from power, and take Hector as her pet. She's conniving, she's selfish, and she's working by her own ambitions, elevating her to be more than just this simple recurring boss fight. I loved her.
Oh. Huh. Good pet.
And fun fact here for Castlevania fans, there's a really easy to miss Circle of the Moon reference hidden in her introduction, which I didn't even notice until my second time watching with subtitles on. She states that she's from the Styria region, which is a region in Austria, and in Circle of the Moon, that game takes place in her castle in Austria. Awesome little Easter egg. And that about covers the main villains in the show, but what about our heroes? I think the show nailed them also, and further improved their characters from what we've seen in Season 1. In Season 1, Trevor was introduced to us as a drunk, angry man that wanted nothing to do with saving humanity until the very end. This season, his character is completely fleshed out for the better, and my god, the fan service involving Trevor will make any Castlevania fan smile from cheek to cheek. He's still a sarcastic asshole that tries not to let anybody in. This gives us some great moments of banter involving Alucard and Trevor. They're these teammates that struggle to get along due to just completely different personalities. They do not mesh well at all with each other.
Fortunate indeed, then, that I chose not to kill you and eat you, Belmont.
And that I decided against gutting you, flaying you, and turning you into shoes, Alucard.
Such a merry band we are. I will find us a covered wagon and horses if you two can manage not to kill each other while I'm gone.
Oh, please. We're not children. You have the most fascinating family junkyard, Belmont.
You're a cockwart, Alucard.
Stop it. You are an adult.
He's pissing me off like it's his job, Sypha.
Grow up.
I am concerned I have thrown my lot in with a demented infant. He is unreliable, emotionally damaged, and apparently very distracting to you while you should be focused on the task at hand. And he's a drunk, and he's self-destructive, and anybody trying to hold on to him may well simply be dragged down with him.
But Trevor does grow as a character, and that's partly because of Sypha, who sees something deeper inside of him. He's been alone since his early teens, traveling by himself, hated by this world, and he's supposed to be this hero fighting for humanity. A humanity that cast his whole family out. So Sypha sees this deep sadness in him that he can't admit. I love this aspect of his character because he's not automatically this legendary hero simply because his last name is Belmont. He needs to learn how to be one. He needs to rely on his teammates for help, and he doesn't take down monsters in 2 seconds like you can easily do in the games. There's an actual struggle involved. And the Belmont clan's history is an enormous part of the fan service the show provides. The group spends most of their time in Trevor's old home, where they had a secret underground vault filled with knowledge from the family throughout the centuries, weapons from their history. You see all sorts of Easter eggs, including, by the way, a Medusa head on a shelf and an eyeball, right there on the left side. And there's a relic that any Castlevania fan would also recognize.
I can't believe they hid it. It's the Morning Star.
The whip upgrade known as the Morning Star. I was wondering how they were going to handle the upgrade. In the games, the vampire killer whip can change form, and it can become this chained whip. In the series, it's a totally different weapon, which does leave me with some questions that we don't have answers to yet. Where did the Morning Star come from in this universe? Does that mean the vampire killer's not special? Maybe the vampire killer actually is the Morning Star, and the whip he'd been carrying the whole time isn't the original whip, but just some kind of blessed item? I didn't feel it was necessary to explain all this just yet, since in my opinion, I feel like most of the Belmonts weren't even fully aware of the whip's origin, if any, since the days of Leon Belmont, the original Belmont. Speaking of which, the biggest, most exciting moment to me in the entire series so far. Something I wanted and didn't expect at all that we would get. They reference the events of Lament of Innocence, and we get a full-blown look at Leon Belmont in a painting several times. I about jumped out of my chair, and Trevor even talks about Leon's history, explaining where his clan came from.
Belmont isn't even a Wallachian name. That just dawned on me.
No. The family's originally from the Kingdom of France, but we moved out of there a few hundred years ago. We're professionals. We move where the work is.
What does that even mean?
All the dark things moved into the east. I think it was a Leon Belmont who entered the region first. And he built this house. And dug the foundations for everything under it. all that's left of us.
I find it interesting that we finally get an explanation as to why Leon established the clan, but nobody had faced Dracula until now. And that involves a funny question that comes up all the time that people ask me. What do Belmonts do that don't face Dracula? Apparently they don't just sit around and wait. They're famed vampire hunters that actively work to destroy creatures of the night while attempting to track down Dracula. And Dracula's castle can teleport anywhere it wants to, so they've never been able to keep it in one place long enough to get to Dracula. Dracula just kind of looks out the window and he's like, oh shit, a Belmont's coming. Teleport somewhere else. Again, fleshing out the story for a video game series decades old that didn't have much of a story to begin with. And there's a really subtle scene here that I can't help but call beautiful, with Trevor finally deciding to take up the mantle of a Belmont, realizing that he's about to face Dracula, one of the biggest goals of his entire lineage. And he looks at this painting of Leon, who's his direct ancestor, and then with just this look of determination in his face, touches the whip. Subtle moments like this really point out the little things that show that the creators of the show understand Castlevania. It's a series where the theme is legacy. Generations that choose to bear a responsibility, that keep passing it down from generation to generation. A hero finally coming to terms with the role that his family needs to play in this world. But that story also stretches to Alucard, another character handled with extreme care, and they really highlight how much of a tragic figure he is. He's half vampire and he's working with a human to kill his father, who he loves dearly. In this series, it really gives us a look at how broken he really is on the inside, due to his mother's death and having to kill the only family left in his life. And we all know that Alucard is Dracula spelled backwards, but now we get some context and meaning behind his name and why he decided to keep the name Alucard instead of Adrian.
Alucard, they called me. The opposite of you. Mother never liked that. Did you know that? She hated the idea that I might define myself by you, even in opposition to you. She loved us both, enough that she wanted us to be our own people, living our own lives, making our own choices. And so here I am, choosing to honor my mother by killing my father. No longer Adrian Tepesh, choosing to be Alucard of WarriorKiyo, the name of my mother's people.
While Trevor and Sypha are in the Belmont library talking, Alucard spends his time going around doing research of his own, and you can see how uncomfortable he is even being there, in a place dedicated to wiping out creatures in the same category he belongs to.
This is quite amazing. Isn't it? It's amazing.
Charming.
You're not even a little bit impressed?
Well, it's like a museum dedicated to the extermination of my people, so no. Not thrilled.
And Sypha is actually a character I never really cared about. I never found her interesting in the game. But the Netflix series even makes her an interesting character. She's the glue that holds them together. And she's just traveling with Trevor and Alucard, so she feels completely alone. Which in turn causes her and Trevor to start getting closer with each other, as they should, since they end up getting married in the storyline. But what I learned to appreciate the most about her character was how truly powerful she was. I never liked playing as her in Castlevania 3, so that's never something that me as a Castlevania fan came to appreciate. We always hear in later games how powerful the Belmont Belmont clan became after it mixed with the Belnades clan, giving future Belmonts these vast magic abilities, and you can see that in full action here. Inside the library, there's a magic mirror that becomes a central point to the plot, and Sypha uses it to finish a spell to keep Dracula's castle from being able to move. She essentially breaks the engines powering Dracula's castle and transports it to them. The castle's flipping out, teleporting in and out of dimensions. Nobody knows what the hell's going on.
What the fuck just happened?
And as soon as they enter, there's an epic battle between them and the vampires in another I fell out of my chair moment. The vampires are all going at each other. The three heroes walk up, and again, subtle moments. The vampires stop in their tracks suddenly, realizing that someone is standing at the entrance, one being the son of Dracula, and the other being someone that's holding a holy whip. But that's not the I fell out of my chair moment. While the soundtrack for the series has been good, there hasn't been any music from the games redone, and we finally get a rendition of Bloody Freaking Tears, quite possibly the greatest Castlevania tune of all time.
I terrify them. Sypha disorients them, Alucard goes over the top, and we support him.
Yes.
Begin.
Finally, when that scene ended, I swear I paused it, and then I promptly rewinded, watched it again, and then I had to do it one more time, because that scene was amazing. I've spent a lot of time saying some great glowing things about the show, so it's perfect, right? No. Let's talk about what I didn't like, because unfortunately, there was some things I really, really didn't like. Now, it is possible that some of these things might get addressed in Season 3, so I can't hold it against the show too much, but I have to review the show as it exists right now. From Episodes 1 to Episode 7, it was just a constant growing high note. At the end of the show is where everything starts kind of falling apart for me. After this castle vampire fight, they chase Dracula right away. I would have liked to have them explore the castle more, fighting different monsters from across the Castlevania universe, maybe Medusa, Monster Grant, I'll get to that one. Like in Castlevania 3, somebody. We did get some bosses from the games like Slagra and Gaibon in the beginning of the show, but nothing else really major from the Castlevania universe. There's some iconic staples in Castlevania that I feel are essential to the experience. One of those is Dracula's right-hand man, Death. I expected to see Death in some way, shape, or form in this show. He's nowhere to be seen. At all. They go straight for Dracula, and that made the entire final portion of the show feel like it was in fast forward. Even if it lasted another season, I would have liked it if they had just slowed down a little bit and give us all those juicy Castlevania details. It was just a severely missed opportunity. Also, I mentioned Grant. Grant was not in the show at all either. I understand as a character, he really isn't that interesting. I get that. But he was part of the original cast of characters, and I feel he really should have been adapted into the series. There just just really was no valid reason to take him out other than the writer's own dislike of the character, which he's always been very open about. And that really is a shame. Very, very disappointing to me. But there may be hope. Grant has been described as a pirate, sometimes as a thief, sometimes both. Isaac, in the end, he's alone in the desert, and he's attacked by a group of thieves. He ends up fighting them, ends up killing them. He uses his Devil Forge Master powers to bring them back as monsters. Now I want to look at this guy. The main thief in particular, he's oddly well animated. For some generic random character, he's got specific features like scars. I'm going to pose a new theory that this is Grant. So I can't knock the show for not having Grant yet, because I do have some things that might back this up. Isaac turns him into some kind of oafish monster that he essentially enslaves, which falls right in line with what Dracula did to him in Castlevania 3. But also, the producer of the show was asked about Grant previously in an interview, and he was very evasive about it and said that's getting into spoiler territory, so he doesn't want to say anything. He never claimed he was never going to be in the show, so I think there's merit to this theory I have. And I'm sure I'm not the only one that's thought about it, but I guess we'll have to wait till season 3 to see what happens with that. And the final battle against Dracula, it went from extreme highs for me to ultimately disappointment. The fight itself was amazing and showed off Dracula's powers immensely as all three of them teamed up on him as he uses moves straight from the game.
Speak, a magician.
Sypha!
You must be the Belmont.
And that scene there with Trevor punching him, I laughed my ass off. That's another scene I had to rewind. Dracula doesn't even feel it. This is the issue I have with the fight. It felt like Trevor and Sypha barely contributed. Yes, they attack Dracula and get a couple hits in, but he mainly just kind of slaps them aside like they're nothing. Dracula's so powerful and everything they did to him barely affected him, so it was really Alucard that took him down. The two of them go flying around the castle Dragon Ball style and beating each other down. And it's a badass fight, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, I felt like it really took away from Trevor being the legendary hero and the man who slayed Dracula. Did he, or did Alucard do 99% of the work? Although, let me backtrack one moment and say that I thought it was really cool that when Dracula gets hit with the whip, he recognizes it. So there's some history there between him and the whip. He knows. So that's probably something that's going to be explored in later seasons.
The Morning Star Whip. Well played, Belmont. And I have had enough!
Another really big high is when Dracula and Alucard end up in Alucard's old room where he grew up. And you just get this emotional moment between father and son where Dracula just realizes, this is my son and I'm killing him. What am I doing? And then Alucard delivers the final blow, not Trevor.
It's your room. My boy. I'm killing my boy. Lisa, I'm killing our boy. We painted this room. We made these toys. It's our boy, Lisa. I must already be dead. Son. Father.
I have such a huge problem with this. This entire moment and how much Alucard contributed to the fight should have really been saved for a Symphony of the Night season. Now, when they eventually and inevitably get to that time period, I'm gonna feel like I already watched it. With the Belmont mixed into the final battle, Trevor should have really been the one to deliver that final blow. And another iconic and almost essential part of a Dracula battle is the final transformation. Usually Dracula's got several forms that he resorts to when he's backed into a corner. None of that in here. He just dies. In Castlevania 3, which this is based off of, he's got 3 forms they could have adapted. Even if you want to go the Symphony of the Night route, he's got a couple forms in there they show. They show the big demon form at the beginning from Rondo of Blood. At the end, he's got another demon form that Alucard faces against. Why just have him in his regular form and then he dies? I don't understand why. Overall, this just kind of left me with this empty feeling when Dracula disappeared. An amazing show that had me overjoyed as a fan, but then ended with a whimper. And another thing, the castle doesn't fall. Guess that's different here. It just stays there empty. Nothing happens. I thought it was cool that after Dracula died, they show all the crazy, dark spirits flying out of him and swirling around the castle. But the castle, like I said, doesn't fall. It just sits there empty. And then Alucard makes it his home. By the end of episode 7, the Dracula situation is completely resolved. He's dead. So what are you doing for a whole final 25-minute episode? The final episode is all set up for season 3. It kind of felt tacked on. I don't know. And when season 1 ended, I was pretty sure I knew where season 2 was headed. Normally I would say that season 3 is headed towards the Curse of Darkness route, but how they changed up all the characters and where they ended up in season 2, I have no idea where this show's going. I really don't. I'm extremely confused as how they would even adapt Curse of Darkness at this point. I don't think they are. I think they're gonna try to mix elements from Castlevania 3 and maybe some elements of Curse of Darkness and create some kind of original thing. Maybe Carmilla's going to be the main vampire now, and then I don't know. It's weird. So to sum up all of my thoughts, Castlevania Season 2 is a massive improvement over Season 1. It created compelling characters, plenty of fan service, genuinely awesome action scenes. It is great, but there are some things wrong with it and some major missed opportunities that, as a Castlevania fan, it's really hard to overlook. It's not something that should be overlooked, in my opinion. There are some negative things I said about the show, but I don't want that to take away from the fact that it really is great. Season 2 was awesome. Very strong start, very strong continuation, very weak ending. Having said all that, I could still confidently say that this is the best video game adaptation I've ever seen. Nothing else compares out there that's been done yet. You could still tell that this project came out of love for Castlevania. And that's definitely something that they should get major credit for, because a lot of times when we get these video game adaptations, especially Hollywood, it's just a straight paycheck. There's no passion involved. Netflix Castlevania doesn't fall into that category. You could really tell this whole project has just so much passion for the series. So I'm curious to hear your opinions. Did you love Season 2? Did you hate Season 2? Do you have mixed emotions about it like I do? Let me know in the comments below.
When you get back to whatever steaming underworld shithole you came from, you tell them there are still Belmonts up here.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to smash that like button with all of your strength. Make sure you subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss any new content. And for as little as $1 a month, you can support the channel directly on Patreon. This is Fabian, I love you guys, and I'll see you next time.